And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Alien Spaceship stream. You could be watching from anywhere around the country or the world, and I really appreciate every single one of you. Coming to you from the Spaceship Studios from a galaxy far, far away. Alright, now we'll be going to the next window. Over here. Alright, hello, it's I, Alien Spaceship. I hope everybody, Oh, hello there, Sawgirl. Hey there, Mr. Spaceship. What's on the agenda for this evening? Hello there, Sawgirl. What's on the agenda for this evening is I'm going to be reviewing over the trials that happened today, which is the Ryan Walsh trial and another trial I heard about that I know a little about, which is Maya Hernandez. Is on CTV instead, but that was something that also started today. Later on, I'm going to probably do some reactions to some trial content stuff. So that is what's on the agenda for this stream. Hope you are. Thank you for being here with us or checking in. Because as I was there with the Brian Walsh trial, I came in the chat a little bit later, but I saw parts of it before that. I think it's going over smoothly. I still feel, in my opinion, the defendant is guilty in that case. And it seems quite obvious with the blood and the hair and stuff of the crime scene that it had to be him that did this intentionally. And Sawgirl says, well, Mr. Alien Spaceship, I was waiting for our Alicia Andrews sentencing, and it was scheduled for today, and then it was gone. Do you know anything about that? Okay. Okay, so with the Alicia Andrews, it was supposed to happen today, but it was delayed for another date. That's what happened with it. I was told about the trial over the weekend, maybe on Friday, that they were going to be airing it, and then it didn't quite go that way. So it was delayed and it's going to be rescheduled. And hello, Shecky and Fifi. Alright. Hello, Mr. Alien Spaceship, cruising through to say hi. Hope you have been good. Oh, Shecky, it's been a while since I've seen you, so I hope you're doing well too. I have been doing fine. I have been quite busy with the spaceship, but it's all everything's going fine, thank you. Fifi said her lawyer filed a 2 to 3 motions to get a new judge. Says judge is biased. I heard about the biased judge. I heard about that, but I wasn't. I didn't know that it had an impact on what we saw. So thanks for the info. Sargo says I was looking for her to be sentenced today, but what you're saying is it's going to be on tomorrow. I am not completely informed about. I'm not too sure when it's going to be. When it was rescheduled to. Let's see. It might be tomorrow, possibly. I don't know completely for sure to tell you that. Oh, let's go here. Oh. That. And, ooh, okay. Let's see. It was not rescheduled yet. Okay, thank you, Fifi. I didn't, yeah, because I didn't know off the top of my head of any date. So if there was a date it was going to be rescheduled to, I either forgot about it or it wasn't ever told in the first place. So yeah, 'cause I didn't know of any date. So there you go. Thank you. All right, so today, Monday, December 8th, in the Brian Walsh murder trial focused on presenting the physical evidence, including blood-stained items, surveillance footage, and defendants' post-disappearance activities. For instance, the defendant went to some places around that time during when this murder happened, and they talk about that today. So, to kind of map out, because it's very important to know about those things, because when you map out a specific event of the defendant, what they did, it can really sway the tides of the trial. It could really seal their guilt, maybe could show shadow of a doubt with innocence. It also can do that. So, seeing the different places that they go is... I liked seeing that today. I thought that was interesting. Okay, so I got a late check out because my phone's going to die and because it's like really messed up. Phone won for a few days, so I'll be watching from the TV. Talk to you from there. Okay, understood, Saw Girl. Thank you. The detective stuff. There's a lot of you see in movies, like in TV shows, like crime investigation shows, is really what was on today's agenda on the trial, because they had the different samples and different items from the scenes. Hello, Remy. Good evening. Welcome to the stream. Hope you had a good day. I think I saw you earlier. All right. Yeah, so that is always... Because even in, say, the wreckage of Titanic... I talked about Titanic briefly yesterday because of the pools in Titanic. But in the Titanic, there is these... Oh, it's your bedtime, and you should be heading to bed. And it is late where you are, because I've been starting these live streams much later than usual. But yeah, so glad you caught alive. Yes, great to see you too as well, Remy. We're talking about the pool rooms, because there's different games with pools in them. So the Titanic has a pool in it, but they never accessed it because it's behind a flood wall, because they had these flood gates that they activated in the ship before it sunk to try to stop the sinking or lessen it. It's what it was built to do. The water spills over the top of it, and it just goes down, and like a domino effect happens. Hello, Glow. Scared. And Mermaid says, by the way, I'm here just using my hands. Oh, okay. So, yeah, so they made recreations of the pool through animations, but no one's ever really seen it since 1912. There's a Turkish bath that they were able to show, but not the certain areas that have been blocked off. They would need some sort of mechanism to pull the crank to open it up, and they haven't done that. It's a very fragile ship. So even on Titanic, there's different artifacts that were collected from it, like shoes and different items that were no bodies, but just pieces of shoes and things like that. Dr. Titanic, how to pull it. Okay. And that is the situation even with the Titanic and different shipwrecks, there's items to be recovered. Oh, the Titanic had a pool in it. Yes, the Titanic had a pool. It was a Victorian pool. It was kind of different than the pools that we have today. It was a very simple. But same thing with a crime scene. You're going to have this... Oh, hello, Snowflakes. Welcome. Same thing with Titanic. You're going to have artifacts that are recovered. We call them artifacts, but it's also evidence, for different things. For instance, like in a crime scene, what we would call artifacts with the Titanic discovery is evidence. So there's like shoes that people have, or clothing, or pieces of furniture, or mattresses, or cloths, stuff like that, bed sheets. A lot of times are bloody. So that is like stuff from the crime scene that we saw today in the trial. So speaking of the Brian Walsh trial, they showed the shoes, they showed the different sheets, hair, stuff like that to prove their case. And yeah, it's very gruesome indeed. Okay, just for the record, this is the pool in Titanic. It's animated. Alright, that's the pool in Titanic. That's what it looked like a long time ago, and it's not been seen because it's behind a flood wall. Nice to see you all. Shout out to all of you. Okay. So, like CSI, the forensic shows, things like that. All of that is good for a trial because it's important. So, going over specifics, the forensic evidence. Matthew Sheehan, a specialist from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, testified that a knife found in a kitchen cabinet of the Walsh home, as well as stains on the basement floor and support beam, all tested positive for blood. Discarded items. Jurors were shown photos of items recovered from a dumpster near Brian Walsh's mother's apartment complex, including a hacksaw, a hatchet, a hammer, a bloody rug with hair, and Anna Walsh's black jacket. Sheehan confirmed these tools and the rug also tested positive for blood. And you can clearly see that it tests positive for blood in the images, right? But they have technical forensics to really show that something was bloody or not, through their scientific studies. When they test different objects in their labs, for instance. And there's surveillance footage. Surveillance footage is another very important thing to have in a trial because, you see somebody doing something or not doing something could also really prove a case or not for either side. Like if somebody's worried about being caught on a camera, right, and they didn't do anything, they're just walking past, although things can be twisted around a certain way, still you have that there where people are clearly trying to prove a point and you can see what is and what isn't. So yes, the surveillance footage is also very important. Prosecutors showed surveillance videos from multiple stores, Lowe's, CVS, Walgreens, a liquor store, where Brian Walsh purchased large quantities of cleaning supplies and tools with cash in the days following his wife's disappearance. Let's see. Glow says, "Are you new to Aliens chat, Snowflake?" I'm not exactly sure who Snowflake is, but it must be. So yeah, I'm not. They must have changed their name and profile picture from something else. But yeah, I'm not quite sure who that is exactly. But shout out to them. I'm glad they're here. As long as everybody acts right. Medical examiner testimony. Dr. Richard. Medical examiner testimony. Dr. Richard Atkinson from State Medical Examiner's Office continued his testimony from Friday discussing his effort to test the recovered items for human tissue. During cross-examination, the defense questioned him about possibility of sudden unexplained death. Well, thank you, Snowflake. You SUD, which the medical examiner stated was extremely uncommon for a healthy woman and for which there was no evidence in this specific case. Right. The co-worker's testimony. Two of Anna Walsh's colleagues from her real estate company testified about their searches for her when she missed work in Washington, D.C., and the head of security for the company also took the stand. A director also confirmed Anna had a life insurance policy worth about $500,000 with Brian as a beneficiary. Kind of like with Monica Cementelli with Fabio. He had an insurance policy, and that insurance policy, I believe that's what it was. She was trying to get it, and her and Baker were going to live a life of luxury, apparently, if they were able to get that and get that money. But it didn't, thankfully, work out that way. So the insurance stuff, people could get insurance money or out of someone getting not alive or passing away or murdered, whatever people want to call it. They can get something out of it in return. But then again, if they're deliberately murdering someone to get the money, that's not really too nice. That's what that would remind me of. All right. Brian Walsh has pleaded guilty to charges of misleading police and improper disposal of body, but maintains his innocence in the murder charge itself. Okay, let's go here. And this is some stuff prior to what I just said. Some things that happened prior to that was before today's testimony, prosecutors in the Brian Walsh murder trial focused on establishing a timeline of evidence, motive, and digital blueprints of the alleged crime. Key evidence presented include internet search history. Massachusetts State Police Trooper presented a list of internet searches recovered from Walsh's laptop, which was reportedly synced with his son's iPad. These searches included topics related to divorce on December 27, 22. Hello, Moki. Good evening. And Moki says, sentencing tomorrow, possibly. DP for that dude who offed his wife, her parents, brother, and dogs. Thank you, Moki, very much. I'll check that out in the morning. All right. Okay. Shelby Nelly. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it very much. Okay, and I'm going to save this right here. Oh, I see a mermaid said something. Okay, I'm going to say that correctly this time. A mermaid says, I want to swim there. I'm feeling summer and Christmas this year for once. I like that, summer and Christmas. Yeah, I like to have Christmas in July, but it's the other way around. Yeah. So in the Titanic, it had heat in there. It had some sort of heating mechanism. And it's certainly a situation where I'm sure people were able to probably hypothetically swim in it. Yeah, of course. It was cold around that time Titanic went on the sea. It was warm. I mean, it was hot. I'm being silly. It was very cold outside when they were having the Titanic, so they had a heater inside, so I'm sure people could swim in there. All right, so Brian Walsh is a person that's on trial. Oh, you're talking about the show. I'm not too sure which one. So the one I was talking before was a person that's been on trial for a couple of days or a week or two. And this other individual, Shelby Nelly, is a different trial that, and the sentencing, possible death penalty will be tomorrow for that trial. So that is what she was referring to. So those are two different people. Brian Walsh is different, and Shelby Nelly is another person. Getting a little bit in more detail about who that is exactly. That's the wrong window, of course. And then we're going to get the right thing right here and do this. Hello, Fog. Good to see you. Okay. And I've seen so many trials that I don't always, even in like one year, I can see many different trials, but I don't always remember every detail about them. It depends on what it is. All right, Shelby Nelly, which is the one that Mogi just mentioned, pleaded guilty to deleting killing his wife and her parents and her brother and family's three dogs in 2018. I heard about this case, but this was before I was watching trials. But I've heard about the case though. Primarily to avoid getting caught for his wife's initial murder, a jury has recommended the death penalty for the in-law murder. Death penalty law murders and former sentencing is pending, which tomorrow it might happen. And let's see. Moki says it's to cover up that he offed the wife. Okay. Jamie Ivanek, wife, nearly killed his 21-year-old wife in January 18 in their Port Richey, Florida home. He strangled her and hit her with a hammer and then buried her body in the backyard. He claimed she attacked their daughter with a knife during a psychotic episode which led him to kill her in self-defense. All right, Snowflake. Okay, let's... The cover up. For months, nearly used Jamie's phone to send texts and photos to their children, to her family, pretending she was alive and away due to family emergency or other issues. The in laws, Richard, Laura, and Nicholas Ivanek, when the family grew suspicious and insisted on seeing Jamie, Nellie drove their Trapoon Springs home in December 2018. Oh, he did the whole pretend to be her thing. Yeah, I remember we were watching a trial recently and somebody did that in Wickashaw, where Brooks did his thing. The trial we were watching a month or two or three ago, that was a trying to pretend to be her. He murdered he murdered Richard first when he was alone, then Laura when she returned home, and finally Nicholas after they shared a meal and watched TV, and he beat all three to death with a hammer, covered their bodies with paint and tarps, and killed the family dog. Fifi says, when you ask people questions on YouTube and they say it doesn't matter, it matters to me. I like details. Absolutely. I like details are very important because I I also think it's important to have because especially something you're passionate about or wanting to know about some sort of a topic, it could be very essential to the research or whatever's going on, what the details are, because it not mattering, it does matter. It's dodging the bullet. That's why when I say sometimes I don't know what the answer is when I really don't know something, but I try to find the answer or have someone in chat say what it is. Yeah. So I appreciate Moki's info on this. All right, arrest. Near Nelly took Laura's SUV and drove to Ohio with his two young children, planning to return to dispose of the bodies, and he was arrested in Ohio in January 2019 after the bodies were discovered during a welfare check and a A Home Depot receipt for supplies linked him to the scene. Legal proceedings and sentencing. Guilty pleas. In late 23, Nelly pleaded guilty to manslaughter with a weapon for his wife's death, receiving a 30-year sentence to 3 counts of first-degree murder for his in-laws' deaths. This guy is killing all over the place. Oh, hello, Zero. Great to see you as always. Timu check. Yes. Yeah. Yes, good manifolds. Yeah, shout out to the manifolds. We are talking about some crime cases right now. That's what we're discussing. And I was talking to him about the pool of Titanics that had something to do with what I was saying. Yeah. So, thanks for checking in, Zero. The spaceship kitchen that was installed has been working perfectly. Prosecution, okay, yeah. Prosecution argued the murders were cold, calculated, and premeditated, done to avoid arrest, which justified the death penalty. Defense argued for a life sentence presenting evidence of Nellie's traumatic childhood, history of abuse, and mental health issues as mitigating factors. Jury recommendation. In July 25, the jury voted 11 to 1 to recommend Nellie receive the death penalty for all 3 in-law murders, formal sentencing. A final decision in the hands of the judge with a formal Spencer hearing set for December 9, 2025, that's what it means, to allow defense to present final evidence before the sentence is imposed. Alright, Zero says it was the Olympian, or however it's spelled. You spelled it right, the Olympian, which is Titanic's sister ship. And there's also the Britannic, which is another ship. So it was 3 sister ships. Okay, and next part. The sentencing trial in Shelby Nelly in July 25 involved extensive evidence and emotional testimony from both prosecution and the defense. Going to go over what the prosecution evidence was in this. Aggravating factors. The prosecution focused on the premeditated and calculated nature of the crimes to argue for the death penalty. Crime scene evidence. Jurors were shown graphic photos and video a blood-stained home, including walls and furniture, where the victim was beaten to death with a hammer. Concealment efforts. Investigators presented evidence of Nellie's attempts to cover up the murders. Bodies were doused in paint, roof, sealant, and covered with tarps. Ramoki says it's a very disturbing case. That is absolutely true. Right. Cleaning chemicals and respirator mask when found at the scene. Nellie used his wife's phone for months to impersonate her and allay her family's suspicions. Physical evidence. A Home Depot receipt linked Nellie to purchases of tarps, rope, and tape captured on surveillance video of him shopping with children, a blood-stained hammer, and Domino's pizza receipt from meal he shared with Nicholas before killing him were also presented. And it would, I will say, for a defense can argue hypothetically, what type of tape was it? Was it some Scotch tape or some duct tape? So the type of tape would be important, because if you're using like duct tape to like tape someone's face up, that would be something that a defense might argue about. But of course, it would be easily silenced when the truth comes out about what's really going on, when it's like duct tape, whatever. Yes, usually it's Walmart and the murder aisle. Right. Digital evidence in confession. A jury heard Nellie's recorded police interrogation where he emotionlessly described the killings, claiming he didn't want to kill his in laws but felt he had no choice to avoid getting caught for Jamie's murder. Text messages were shown where Nellie flirted with other women and made plans to move to Ohio in the days following the murders, suggesting a lack of remorse. If you're rich like Walsh, it's Lowe's. All right. All right. All right. Victim impact statements. Family members of the victims delivered emotional testimony about their devastating loss and ongoing trauma, emphasizing the cruelty of the acts. Defense evidence and testimony mitigating factors. The defense sought to life sentence by portraying Nellie as traumatized man who snapped. So this is what the defense was arguing. Traumatic childhood. Nellie's mother and stepfather testified tearfully about his difficult upbringing, including witnessing domestic violence, an ADHD diagnosis, and a history of abuse. Testimony revealed Nellie was allegedly sexually abused by his biological father's wife at age 15 and blamed himself for his father's subsequent suicide. Mental health abuse. The forensic pathologist testified that Nellie suffered from PTSD. The defense argued that Nellie was a victim of domestic violence in his relationship with Jamie, who was allegedly abusive towards him. Model prisoner behavior. A prison expert testified that Nellie had followed the rules, obtained his GED and paralegal certification, and even wrote a novel while in jail, showing he could be productive in prison. All right, the victim impact statements. Members of the Ivanic family provided powerful and emotional victim impact statements during the trial, sharing their immense grief and loss. Renee Split, daughter and sister. She delivered a statement accompanied by photos, slideshow of her family. She described her father, Richard, as everything a father should be, and Laura as a sweet soul, and she spoke of the profound, lasting pain the murders caused, stating the grief that we bear. It isn't just emotional, it seeps into our bones. It's aged us. It's broken us in many ways, and she concluded that the family had been irreparably shattered by the murders. Okay, and Richard Ivan Kick Jr., son and stepson. He testified about his father Richard's and the stepmother Laura's love for foster children and their desire to enjoy retirement, all of which was violently taken away, and he described the loss as creating a ripple effect of pain and trauma for the family. Sarah Lawrence, she shared over Zoom that her aunt Laura was her absolute best friend and a second mom to her, while Uncle Richard would do absolutely anything to help anyone. Joint family statements. Following the jury's death penalty recommendation, the family issued a joint statement saying, quote, "While no sentence can ever bring back our loved ones, today justice demanded accountability, the highest accountability. We are grateful that the jury delivered it." Legal argument. The sentencing phase involved a clash over the application of aggravating versus mitigating factors. Her prosecution argument: premeditation versus calculation. Prosecution emphasized extreme level of planning, highlighted. Prosecution emphasized. Yeah, the poor family. Absolutely. Snowflakes. Prosecution emphasized the extreme level of planning, highlighting how Nellie drove from Texas to commit the murders and sat with the family for a week before killing them and used their phones to orchestrate a cover up for months, avoiding arrest. The primary motive was to avoid arrest for his wife Jamie's murder. Lack of remorse. They pointed to his emotionless confession, this flirtatious texts with other women, and attempts to pawn the victim's jewelry as evidence he lacked remorse. Aggravators outweigh the mitigators. The state argued that the calculated nature of the crimes heavily outweigh the mitigating factors presented by defense. As I said before, the defense has argued trauma and mental health, remorse and responsibility, potential for good. The defense presented evidence Nellie's good behavior in jail, including earnings, a paralegal certification to argue he could be productive with life sentence, ensuring public safety without resorting execution. A Spencer hearing. Let's see. All right, let's see. A Spencer hearing is a critical final opportunity in Florida's death penalty cases for both the defense and prosecution to present last-minute evidence or arguments directly to the judge before the final sentencing is imposed. It is required step designed to ensure the defendant receives full due process. Hello, Michael. Good evening. Welcome to the stream. Key aspects of a Spencer hearing, and more parts of it, is the primary goal is to ensure the judge has all relevant information, including any new evidence not presented at trial, before deciding whether to follow the jury's recommendation. Final arguments. Both legal teams use hearing to passionately argue why the judge should either impose the death penalty or prosecution or a life sentence. Defense. Yeah, so today in the Brian Walsh trial today, Michael, I thought it was interesting with the forensic items that were brought up, where they were testing for blood and they found blood on the different objects, and it was quite clear on some of the pictures that there was blood. So, and there's different hair samples, and I know it's a fascinating field that I've known some things from you about, and in the laboratories they were able to figure out these different things, and I think that's quite very fascinating to me. All right, and the judge's decision. The judge considers the jury's recommendation, which must be given with great weight. All evidence from penalty phase trial and any additional information from Spencer hearing, the judge in Nellie case can choose to impose death penalty as recommended by 11-1 jury vote, or a sentence of life in prison without parole. A judge's decision must be based on written analysis of the aggravating factors versus the mitigating circumstances. Shelley Nellie's Spencer hearing is scheduled for December 9, 2025. It is expected that his defense team will present final arguments emphasizing his traumatic childhood and mental health issues, as reasons for a life sentence, while the prosecution will likely argue that the calculated nature of the murders and lack of remorse justify the jury's death penalty recommendation. The jury will then impose a formal sentencing, and that will be tomorrow. We'll find out more about how that goes. And yeah, okay, Shelby Nelly is a trial that I saw earlier this year. It was in July. I knew it sounded familiar. Yeah, I know about this. And tomorrow we will find out more how it all goes. Another case that happened today on the other network is Maya Hernandez case. Involves a California mother currently standing trial on the murder charges after her 1-year-old son died from being left in a hot car while she was at a medical spa in June 25. The trial began with opening statements on Monday, December 8, 25. Right, incident date June 29, 25. Location a medical spa in Bakersfield, California. Victim Emilio Gutierrez, 1-year-old child. Surviving child. His 2-year-old brother was also in the car, survived, and was placed in protective custody. Charges. Maya Hernandez, 20, faces charges for first-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, child cruelty. If convicted, she faces life in prison. These are I agree, Glow. She is trash. She was getting Botox and she left her kids in the car with air conditioning, and it didn't quite go as planned, and it went out, and she was stuck with the kids were stuck in there in a boiling car. Like, you could take an egg and crack it open, allegedly. Like, so I didn't try this myself, so Mythbusters can go try it out to see how it works, but it's very hot inside a vehicle. So you basically take, like, hypothetically an egg and just open it up and put it in a vehicle, and you could have some sunny side up eggs in a car. So you could really scramble someone's brains by them being in a hot vehicle like that, and it'll conduct heat, and it's all enclosed, so it's basically being cooked. No, what happens. So there's been a lot of these stories, chat, where people are. This was done. She ran out of gas. I don't know the technical stuff about what happened. I'll have to look into it. But I'm assuming she ran out of gas, in my opinion. Okay, but I don't know 100% to tell you. It's my speculation that I agree with that. It was probably the gas, but I don't know for sure. There's people that go to get these plastic surgeries, especially the Brazilian butts that some people get, and sometimes they'll go to shady people. And one time somebody got cement pumped in their backside, and sometimes people get killed over it because they'll give them too much. One time there's someone that had too much medicine that they put them out with, and they're just dead on the table. So, yeah, it can really be messed up what happens with that situation. That people go to great lengths to get these plastic surgeries. So, although she was going to a legal place, she committed an illegal action by leaving the BBL. Yes. Yes. That's the abbreviation version. And I think... So, yeah. There's many sketchy people that get those BBLs. And they'll go to sketchy people, and, like, it could be life-threatening. And this situation was life-threatening in a different way, which is going to a legal place to get it done, to get a plastic surgery, probably on her face or something like that done, but leaving the kids in a car. I think a responsible adult would leave the kids with a guardian, or if they could bring the kids in and put them and watch them there somehow, or just leave them home with a caretaker, because this is extremely stupid and careless what happened. And Fifi says someone on YouTube was defending her because she's a single parent. She has options and didn't use any of them. I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, her AC was left on. That's true. The AC was left on and it went out. That is correct. I did say that. And just no, she was parked and ran in for lip filters. Okay, lip filter. Okay, to get bigger lips. Okay. AC off after 1 hour. I didn't know that. I guess that may be a new thing in cars. I thought that they could run as long as they can, but okay. So after an hour, the AC went out for some reason. Okay. And CTV did a premiere on it today. Yes, they did. If I heard right, an attorney said the procedure for fillers was 15 minutes. Okay. Thank you for the info. An hour for a lip filler will use a lip plumber. Plumper. All it should take is 15 minutes. What else was she doing? I agree. I definitely agree. She was doing more than getting lip filters in. She waited in the lobby for appointment and hung out with other patrons. Alright, so she was messing around. Okay, yeah, she certainly was doing more than getting a lip filler. And the prosecution allegations. The prosecution allege that Hernandez left her 2 young sons in her Toyota Corolla for hours on a day when temperatures reached over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. They contended that she was informed that she could bring the children inside in the spa lobby, but chose to leave them in the car. Her son Emilio's body temperature was 107 degrees when he was found unresponsive. Prosecution opening statement described the child as having burned from the inside out. Right, Glow. And yeah, CTV premiere opening statement. Yes. Okay. Snowflake says doesn't like CTV, so research myself. Okay. We could look at it. I don't mind playing it. I'll read this like intro and then I'll go and play it. I'm interested to see myself. All right. Defense argument. The defense has described the incident as a terrible, awful mistake, but not murder. They plan to concede to the lesser charges of involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment. Hernandez told investigators she left the car running with the air conditioning on, but evidence suggesting the vehicle model automatically shuts off after an hour of inactivity, leaving the children without AC for a significant period. Yeah, man, it's just these newer cars. I didn't know that's something they do. Like, I didn't even know that it shuts off after an hour. Because I think in the old vehicles, it just runs and runs and runs and runs forever. Now, I'm going to check CTV's coverage on this. I understand some people may not like CTV, but I'm just an enthusiast about what happened here. And I don't mind playing it for a chat reacting to it. All right. But LC is the one I mainly go to, obviously. But, all right, let's see. That's the wrong thing, silly. Alien. Okay. That's the wrong button. That's good. New Jersey trial. 3 hours. Let's see. Here it is. Alright. There we go. Okay, prosecution, Maya Hernandez, child burned from inside out. Okay, so let's see what this is about. Snowflake says, Glow, I think they are more focused on money and all the bricks. Yeah. Absolutely. That may be a possibility. That's what I don't watch it that much, but that's what I've heard. Alright, so here we go. This is Maya Hernandez prosecution from the inside out. Burned from inside out.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This case is called the People vs. Maya Hernandez. But we are here today because of two young boys, two babies. One lost his life and one lost his brother. We are here because of 1-year-old Emilio Gutierrez and 2-year-old Mateo Gutierrez. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today because on June 29th, 2025, the defendant, the biological mother to Emilio and Mateo, the one person who was supposed to protect, supposed to put her two sons above everything else, chose herself. On that day, June 29th, 2025, the defendant chose vanity. She chose her appearance over her sons. And that choice cost Emilio his life. On June 29th, 2025, in the heart of Bakersfield summer, the defendant Maya Hernandez drove from Visalia to Bakersfield. She drove here with her two sons, Emilio and Mateo. She drove here to an elective cosmetic procedure, a procedure to enhance her looks. And ladies and gentlemen, when she drove here, she knew that she could bring the boys, Emilio and Mateo, into the appointment with her. She knew they were welcome. She knew they could wait inside the air conditioning. But she chose to leave them in the car. She chose a break. She chose time to herself. She chose time to socialize with other adults. And again, that choice cost Emilio his life. That choice cost Mateo his brother. From approximately 2:05 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., the defendant sat inside the building at 31 South Real Road. You will see this is a office building type situation. There's a lobby, and then there are rooms where the procedures occur. The defendant sat inside of the lobby.
Yeah, I'd say this prosecutor is very fired up, very passionate. I appreciate the energy. And as I said, a good evening to you, Anna. Always a pleasure. And saw this earlier, could only find 2 openings. Try to get on CTV and Fifi says that's all they had. Okay. Thank you, Fifi, for the info. Yeah, so very fired up. I'm liking this opening so far. And Anna says hello to Miranda. Nice.
in a chair, socializing, engaging in conversations, speaking to other patrons, helping another mother watch her child for over 2 hours while Emilio perished in the car, while Emilio burned from the inside out. She did not leave that building a single time between 2:05 p.m. and 4:30 to check on her sons. She chose to ignore all of her responsibilities. She ignored the fact that she had children that day. She ignored the fact that they were in the car. She spoke about her children, ladies and gentlemen. She told the other patrons in the spa that she had children. What she failed to acknowledge, what she failed to ever say, is that her children were in the car. She didn't tell anybody this information because she knew it was wrong. She knew her 2 babies should not be in the car without her in the heat. But she chose to leave them there anyway. When law enforcement and medical personnel...
I agree, Moki, absolutely. It's a very horrible thing to live with. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, she must feel like the biggest fool on earth, alright? It must feel like the biggest fool ever to do that to, to their kid like that. That is some serious neglect right there. And yeah, maybe she also didn't know about the car. Its air conditioning goes out after an hour, but she still shouldn't have left them unattended like that. That's still not good. Right. And yeah, it certainly has to be a shocking thing. And Anna says a very logical thing. She says, doesn't she see all the cases and recent ones too? A lot of kids die left in cars. What the F? WTF, rather. Which, of course, it means what the fuck. And common sense. Yeah, exactly, Anna. Because a lot of people, as I said, it's like you could cook some eggs in a car like that. I mean, there's many kids that are killed or damaged, injured, or burned up and damaged or dead. It's a combination of all kinds of things that could happen, and she should have been more wise and bring the kids with her. I mean, and also, some person could just try to steal the car with the kids in there somehow. It's best not to leave kids unattended at all, especially in this situation. The most dangerous thing in this situation was leaving the kids in the sun, and one of them died. So I definitely agree. Just completely just like airhead right here, an airhead to the core right here. All right, so absolutely.
Personnel ultimately arrived. Emilio and Mateo were both transported to the hospital. Emilio arrived at the hospital just after 5 p.m., little over 30 minutes after being found by the defendant and his mother. And at that time, ladies and gentlemen, his internal temperature was 107.2 degrees. Emergency room doctors and nurses spent over 40 minutes attempting to perform life-saving measures on Emilio. Those life-saving measures were ineffective. They failed. They failed because they were too late. They failed because he had already been left in excruciating temperatures up to 116 degrees for 2 hours. And on June 29th, 2025, Emilio was pronounced deceased at 5:48 p.m. at 1 year and 20 days old.
Man, a 1-year-old. Wow. Said this car's engine shuts off. No car movements are made. That's 2.5 hours. Yeah. and she should have been aware of that. And she completely neglected that fact too, because she could have had an air conditioning car, right, and they would have been hypothetically alive. But she rejected to do something like that, to be like, look, this just goes out after a certain time. Yeah. And Moki says, what a dumb thing to do, not like she just forgot the kid in the car. Exactly, it was deliberate, because there's people that forget a kid and they go into a place. That's different, but it's not. It's like different, another circumstance. Not different, but like another circumstance. But this, she deliberately put the kid in the car and knew the kid was in there and left, deliberately leaving the kid in there. Too bad not to walk by the car and saw kid sooner. Yeah, yeah. The wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong time, all at once. Yes, Snow, it's extremely sad. It's just so stupid too, and it was deliberate. It was like you literally put the kid in there. It's like to store a child in a car with a 1 hour air conditioning unit. It's extremely irresponsible. It's really appalling about the moronic behavior some of these people can do, especially with kids. And there's been a lot of kids and pets being damaged or dying in cars, like in these type of scenarios. And in general, we've seen lots of trials lately which involving children. So it's really disgraceful. This has to be like the dumbest thing I've heard so far. Like, and I've seen a lot of dumb things. You're gonna leave your kid in a car intentionally, and then do other things and BS around, and go, oh no, one of them is dead. It's not. And 1 year old, it's like, wouldn't a mother be real worried about her kids and wanting to always be around them? It's like, this is very strange, indeed. What a thing to live with, as chat said. Hoagie says, my daughter worked at the grocery store for a while, and they had to break a window on a car that had a baby in it. A baby in it. She was really shaken by the whole thing. Oh my goodness. A baby inside a car, and they had to break the window. Well, I'm glad they were able to see that there's something going on and to save the baby. You're going to have a baby in there? That's going to cook like a it's gonna cook like a breakfast, like sunny side up eggs. That's really that would shake me as well. It's to have to be involved in that kind of situation, to your work, and then something like that happens. Yeah, just people are so stupid, man. It's like Mary Toodle has always had me everywhere with her, never left her sight. So that wouldn't be a problem for her. But some of these parents are really extremely irresponsible. And Loki said in Nevada. Yeah, Nevada on top of that, which is very good to emphasize the location, because Nevada is a desert. It's a burning desert. I will argue one of the hottest places in the country, especially in the summer, and it is very dry too. So yeah, that is extremely stupid. Nevada, in this, it's hot all the time, 99% of the year, in my opinion. And then you're leaving a baby inside a car. That is extremely nightmare fuel right there. Yeah, there needs to be consequences for these actions, because you have to deter people as much as possible. Unfortunately, people aren't being deterred, but you need to deter people as much as possible to not go into these, to not leave their kids or babies in vehicles. Especially a baby. What if it needs help or something, or it needs a diaper change? Just going to let it especially a diaper being changed, or or needs to go to the bathroom. And this is something else I got to bring up about leaving kids in a car. When you leave kids in a car, it's like, what are we doing here? It's like, what if the kid needs to go to the bathroom or something? It's like locked up in a prison. It's it's extremely like a medieval torture method. Yeah, just there's a lot, especially with these people are able to get driver's license. It's still 60 degrees where you are right now. Okay, thank you for the temperature. And yeah, it's not even like 30 degrees right now where you are at the moment. I know it's cooler in the winter sometimes, but yeah, it's still 60 degrees, especially, I mean, during midday. I'm sure it's a bit warm, even during the day. So yeah, I wouldn't leave my dog in a car for 5 minutes. Yeah, it's so extremely cringe. Like with these people, remember, chat. These people can vote, and these people can have a driver's license. They're able to drive a. They're able to pass a driving test. They're able to vote as well. We're basically doomed. Yeah, and I wouldn't say, yeah. I'm just pointing out it's still pretty warm for December. Right? Yes, and Moki, I understand what you meant. Uh, if I myself didn't wasn't completely, uh, I did understand. Yes, it's she's pointing out even in December it's still warm. Yeah. So if it's warm in December, imagine what it's like in the regular parts of the year in the summer. It'd be burning up. It'll boil a kid in there or a baby. Hello, Todd. Good evening to you, sir. Welcome to the stream. We're talking about a case, Todd, that's going on right now, where this woman was getting Botox for her lips, and she left her two kids in the car, and one of them died. And the car air conditioning goes out at a certain point after an hour or so, it seems. So it's really stupid that she's left her kid there to just rot away. I'm going to bed. Nice meeting you all. You on every night? Yes, Snowflake, I'm on every night. That's true. Good evening to you, and have a good evening. I mean, have a good night, I meant to say. Yeah, so that's the case that we're talking about, Todd. It's just a real brainless people out there. It's like people that are just walking zombies. I'm serious. If you had like a zombie apocalypse, you would have zombies that are just like brainless, right? And they're just wanting to eat brains. She's just being brainless, this person. Now, I think anybody can make a mistake, and people make mistakes. Sometimes you're late, sometimes you fall short. You know, we all make errors. No one's perfect, but this is like you're trying your best, your absolute best to make a mistake. Like it seems like you're trying to do what you can possibly do to make sure you mess up in life. Like it's like literally, how can I be messing up today? And here you go. Oh, there's an earthquake in Japan today. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, thank you for letting me know. I'm concerned now. Let's see. But yeah. Okay. North waves observed. Okay. Let's see where this is. So yeah. Completely mindless people. Indeed. It's like guilty as sin, no matter what the prosecution says. Okay, where did it hit? Tsunami warning across northeastern coast of Japan on Monday. Oh, okay, it's northeast. All right. The quake struck at a depth of around 50 kilometers off the coast of Aomori. Okay. I have friends in the south part. Okay, so it was in the northeast. It kind of similar to where it happened before, where like the Russian one happened. Well, that's a really far distance, but it's north. Okay, so thank you, Todd, for the earthquake update. I am concerned about earthquakes happening to people. Okay, so especially Japan. Yeah, it's right in the northern part, northeast. Yeah, that's really makes me scared. All right. So now we're going to continue with the prosecution opening.
He was pronounced deceased so that his mother, the defendant, Maya Hernandez, could obtain cosmetic procedures so she could work on her appearance. That is why we are here today, ladies and gentlemen. That is why Emilio is not here. So she could work on her looks instead of working on being a parent. I want to take a few minutes and go through the actual evidence that I anticipate you will hear in this case, explain to you how it's going to play out. And I'm going to ask you to pay attention closely from the very beginning. Listen carefully. The evidence is probably going to come fairly quickly. I do not anticipate significant factual dispute as to what happened on that day. So please listen from witness number 1. We are probably going to conclude evidence by next week. It is going to be quick. The information: the defendant has been charged with murder. But as we discussed in voir dire, ladies and gentlemen, it is important for you to recognize that she is charged with second-degree murder. We will talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Second-degree murder of Emilio Gutierrez, involuntary manslaughter of Emilio, child abuse with the enhancement of willful harm or injury resulting in death of Emilio. Count 4, child abuse for Mateo. Mateo survived. You will hear why Mateo survived and Emilio did not. We just talked about this briefly, but how did we get here? We got here based upon the defendant's choices, the defendant's actions, the defendant's intentional actions on June 29th, 2025, when she drove from Visalia to Bakersfield with her 1- and 2-year-old in the car. She drove for an elective cosmetic procedure. She waited inside of the building for 2.5 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be important because what you are also going to hear is that she did not have to be, not only did she not have to be in the building at all, her appointment lasted 15 to 20 minutes. The majority of the time the defendant was inside of that building while Emilio perished, she was sitting in the lobby waiting, playing on her Apple Watch, talking to other patrons. Her procedure lasted 15 to 20 minutes. She was seen going into the med spa at approximately 2:04 p.m. She left at approximately 4:33 p.m. You are going to hear this morning from the officers that were initially called out to the scene, the responding officers, and that's going to be Officers Velez Aguilar and Officers Fahel. They were the first law enforcement officers that arrived. When they arrived, Hall ambulance personnel were already attempting life-saving measures on Emilio. You will hear this morning that when officers arrived, Emilio was unconscious. He was lifeless. His lips and limbs were blue. He was limp and he was not breathing. That was his condition at the med spa before going to the hospital. Emilio was ultimately transported to the hospital, at which point officers came into contact with Mateo. Mateo was not in nearly the same condition as Emilio, but he was lethargic, he was red, and he was drenched in sweat when he was ultimately located. And it's important to recognize and remember, ladies and gentlemen, that not only were these two babies trapped in the car, They were trapped and strapped inside of their car seats. They could not leave even if they were able to. At Adventist Health Hospital, Emilio, as we discussed earlier, started receiving treatment from doctors and nurses. This is when it was determined that his temperature was 107.2 degrees. You will hear from the treating nurse, Gabrielle Long, tomorrow. She will talk to you about how Emilio presented when he arrived at the hospital. She will tell you about the temperature and how she obtained that temperature. You will hear about the significance of that temperature. You will hear from Dr. Thomas Riley, the attending physician. You will hear the length of time, the length of efforts doctors and nurses spent attempting to revive Emilio. And you will hear that he was ultimately pronounced deceased at 5:48 p.m. on June 29th, 2025. You will hear from Nurse Elizabeth Bond. She is the nurse that provided treatment to Mateo. You will hear from her that Mateo, while lethargic and sweaty, he was okay when he arrived. His temperature was 99 degrees. You will hear from her and from the coroner, in this case, Dr. Glinecki, that there is an explanation as to why Emilio and Mateo's conditions were significantly different. And that explanation, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be because of their ages, essentially. Babies around 1 year old do not have the ability to regulate their temperatures. They don't have the sweat glands that develop as we get older. Emilio could not release the heat from his body. He could not regulate his own temperatures while he was strapped into that car seat. You will hear from witnesses. This morning, you'll hear from Shelby Murch, Ian Blue. Tomorrow, you'll hear from the nurse that provided the treatment to the defendant. You'll hear from her assistant. And what you will hear is much of what you will also see in the video surveillance, that the defendant sat inside the lobby for about 2 hours, that she socialized, she conversed. You will hear from Shelby and Ian that she mentioned having 2 babies, never mentioned them being with her. You will hear from Ian that at one point he went out to his car to give his dog a walk at about 3 p.m. He walked by the defendant's vehicle, and he will tell you that there were no signs that the vehicle was running, that any activity was happening within the vehicle, or that anybody was inside. You will also hear from Ian that it was so hot outside, he actually chose to skip the walk, pick his dog up, and take his dog back inside for water. Ian wouldn't keep his dogs in the same temperature that the defendant left her babies. You will hear that the procedure only lasted about 15 to 20 minutes. And ladies and gentlemen, you will also hear that not only did the defendant not go out to check on her children during...
And it says, Mateo was, I'm sure, given water and cooling clothes on way to hospital. MES should have taken his temp in ambulance. I agree. Absolutely. Definitely those factors I think would have hurt, are important to do in that situation.
During the 2 hours she was inside. When she went outside at 4:30, it still was not to check on her children. When she left that business at about 4:33 p.m., she was going to her car to get her phone to pay for her procedure. It was by happenstance at that time that she saw Emilio and Mateo and the conditions they were in. At that time, she brought Emilio into the business, flagged down Isabel Carrion, who you will hear from tomorrow. Isabel brought Mateo into the business. And you're going...
Yeah, I think they did. I think what Anna is doing was explaining about what happens in a situation like that. Yeah, no one said that they didn't do that. but she could maybe be more clarify. Okay, she's Anna's. Forget what I said. Anna said state doing. Oh, don't forget what I said. I thought she was making a rebuttal. So state doing great, not reading off the paper. Either she's invested in the case, or I'm very impressed with this awesome lady. Bravo. Yeah, she's doing an excellent job at her presentation, and yeah, so I don't think Anna was saying they didn't do that. Anna's just explaining the process of what they would do in that circumstance. Yeah. So thank you, Anna, for the info. And that's like basically what they do. They'll take the temperature, they'll give them cooling cloths and water, stuff like that. Do they have cooling blankets? Maybe ice packs. I don't know. Anna would know. I would think. So Anna, do the EMS have cooling blankets or ice packs? How does it work? All right, let's go continue.
Going to hear from Shelby and Ian that they were shocked to learn that she had children with her based upon her behaviors inside of the spa. You will also see the text messages that the defendant exchanged with the injector, with the registered nurse that provided the treatment. Text messages where she says, "Can I bring my kids inside?" Or "Can I bring my kids in by chance?" "Sure, if you don't mind them waiting in the waiting area, hun." That message, ladies and gentlemen, came before the defendant ever left Visalia for Bakersfield. To kind of piggyback off this information, you're also going to hear that the defendant did have an option for a babysitter that day. She knew she could have asked her sister, and her sister probably would have said yes, but she chose not to. You will also hear that on July 2nd, 2025, detectives with the Bakersfield Police Department performed a recreation of events. What does this mean? It means they took conditions almost identical to the time and date of June 29th, 2025. They selected a date with almost identical temperatures outside. They drove the vehicle the same exact amount of time it would have taken the defendant to drive from Visalia to Bakersfield. They parked the vehicle in the same spot at 31 South Real Road. They parked it at the same exact time the defendant is seen by video surveillance arriving. They shut it off at the exact time the defendant is seen getting out of her car. They left it in the exact condition the defendant stated it had been left in. They left it there for the exact same time until the defendant came out of the business at 4:33. While this recreation was taking place, they placed calibrated thermometers inside the vehicle. Inside the vehicle and inside Emilio's car seat to see how hot did this seat get. How hot was this car while Emilio was strapped into this car seat? They recorded the temperatures with body-worn camera footage. You, ladies and gentlemen, will get to watch the temperatures rise and rise and rise. You will see from between 2:15 and 4:33, the temperatures rose from 81.8 degrees to 116 degrees. At 4:33 p.m., I apologize, the temperature in that car was 116 degrees. You will see video. This photograph up here, ladies and gentlemen, because this photograph to the medical spa. Video in that car was 100.
Whoa, 116 degrees. Yeah, that is just insane. You know, the first responders did the best they could, all right? But that is hot. Anna said, "Love when the state feels their case personally, and she knows her case. Some pros read while whole opening off a paper." Yeah, I remember back in when I was in school, there's a difference between reading something from a paper and like acting it out. It was this type of way. That is a very well said statement. Absolutely. There's not clear. It's not clear from anything from current reporting if she received an offer, a plea deal. It's not really clear. No, at the moment. And she pleaded not guilty to all charges, including first-degree murder, involving manslaughter and child cruelty. But plea negotiations happen behind the scenes. There has been no public announcement that a formal offer was made or accepted. So that is the answer. At the moment, there's no information about it.
And 16 degrees. You will see video, you will see photographs of the thermometer. You will see an increase in over 34 degrees while Emilio was strapped in his car seat and the defendant was sitting inside of the air-conditioned medical spa.
Bro is strapped to a car seat. It's like, I tell you, it's like a medieval torture device. Yes. Moki says, seems like she would have sought a plea, throw herself on the mercy of the court. Right. Absolutely. You know, she would probably do anything to try to get out of this if she could. But, man, it's like some medieval torture device. You strap someone in a hot piece of a hot metal box in the boiling sun in the New World. It sounds like a recipe for disaster.
You will see video surveillance. And I included this photograph up here, ladies and gentlemen, because this photograph to the far left, if you're looking at it, that is the seat the defendant sat in. May seem insignificant where she sat until you hear, ladies and gentlemen, that she chose a seat facing away from the window. She chose a seat in the part of the med spa where her vehicle could not be seen. And never once did she get up to look out the window. Never once did she exit that med spa to check on her children. Never once did she check the well-being of her children in 2.5 hours. You'll hear from the defendant that she intentionally left them in the car. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. She did not forget them. She knew they were there. She left them in the car. You will hear that she knew the dangers of doing so. She knew before she got out of her car that if she left them in the car, Emilio and Mateo could be injured, that they could die. She knew that. You will hear that with that knowledge, with that information, she did it anyway. She knew she could cause the death to the children, and she left them there anyway. You will hear about the autopsy. This will come probably on Wednesday of this week. Dr. Glenicki performed the autopsy. Emilio died of hyperthermia, which is commonly referred to as heat stroke, due to being left in the vehicle. Now, second-degree murder. This is where you're going to take all of the facts that you hear and you're going to put it with the law. And as we discussed in voir dire, second-degree murder can be arrived at 2 different ways. First way, implied malice, commission of an act.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to argument.
And that is the defendant committed an act that caused the death of Emilio. When the defendant acted, she had the state of mind called malice aforethought. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to focus in this case. You are going to be working with an implied malice. That is second-degree murder. What implied malice means is that she intentionally committed the act.
Objection, argument.
You can continue to describe what implied malice is.
Thank you. The natural and probable consequences of the act were dangerous to human life in that the act involved a high degree of probability that it would result in death. At the time she acted, she knew the act was dangerous to human life. She deliberately acted with conscious disregard for human life. Keep these things in mind throughout the evidence. It will make the evidence more clear. It will make your job easier at the end. The second way, failure to protect as a mother. The defendant had a legal duty to protect Emilio, and the defendant failed to perform that duty, and that duty caused the death of Emilio. When the defendant failed to act, she had a state of mind called malice aforethought. That is the same state of mind that we just discussed, ladies and gentlemen. The same 4 requirements. Keep these in mind with you as you work through the evidence. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you, as you listen to the evidence over the next couple of days, keep some things in mind. 1, there are no accidents here. There are no accidents in this case. This isn't a case of a forgotten child whose mom was in a hurry. These were intentional actions done willfully by the defendant. Keep in mind also that we are here because of choices. Choices made by the defendant. Choices made to leave her children in the car. Choices made to put her appearance before her children. And ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this case, after you have heard all of the evidence, I will have another opportunity to come up here and speak with you. And at that time, I'm going to ask you to consider the defendant's actions, the defendant's choices. And I'm going to ask you to come into this courtroom and tell her that there are consequences to her choices. And you are going to do that by choosing to find her guilty of second-degree murder of Emilio and child endangerment of Mateo. I'm confident that that is the choice you will make after you hear the evidence in this case. That is the choice that will be best supported by the facts, by the evidence, and by the law. I will be asking at the end of this case for a guilty verdict to all charges and enhancements. Thank you for your time.
This is the defense for 5 minutes. That's it. All right, and Moki says, anyone have any compassion for her, young and dumb? Well, I do think that, like I was saying before, people can make mistakes and do things that are wrong. Like, you know, I will say this is an excessive one where she needs to learn to not do stuff like this, and there needs to be a repellent and a deterrent for other people to not do that. And I do think it's, in my opinion, negligent. It seems more self-absorbed. And she needs to take personal accountability for what she did. And that is my thoughts about it. And yeah, it's true, she is young and she is not the brightest person. That is true. It's just there's a like a spectrum of things you can mess up on, and this is a real big extreme where you're kind of going off the charts in this realm. Maybe in her life later she can learn and do better next time, and other young people that are dumb can learn not to do that. But yeah, I definitely think she probably was self-absorbed and negligent. It's like some people shouldn't have kids, as the saying goes, or there needs to be some right guidance. I do think there's people that lack a brain, so definitely needs to take personal accountability and deter her and others from doing something like this again. And maybe this will cause more young people to be wise and to not leave people in the car and doing something. Is it wasn't like going to the grocery store or something. This was like really like far out there, and because she could have looked at the manual in her car and was like, after an hour the kids are going to just cook like a turkey. But as I say, completely irresponsible. Needs to take personal accountability. I do think, like what Passion is saying, is selfish and negligent. And a valuable lesson was learned. At failure, there's a great teacher, so she has learned a valuable lesson. And she certainly needs to not be let off the hook or be given a slap in the wrist because she's gone off the charts. Like, say there's a video game, right? Like the pirate game or something, and you go off the charts. And you're going to the land. You know what it's like? This game called Big Rigs. The Angry Video Game Nerd did a very good cover on that a couple years ago. It was hilarious. It was like this stupid game where like they really messed it up, and you could just go off the map and go a million miles per hour, and everything is like with Microsoft Paint was put on there, and you're just flying off the charts. That's what she did. She went off the charts, off the game, and went somewhere else. Like, it's like you made a home run, and now you have to go meet the piper. My hair appointment for tomorrow got canceled. Scared. Oh, Lord. Oh, no. That is absolutely devastating. Scared. And it's certainly a bummer, Moki. Indeed. Anna says, no, don't have two kids if you're going too young and dumb. It can be 50 degrees and you still can't leave a 1-year-old and any little kids in the car alone for 2.5 hours. Absolutely. I'd be scared they get kidnapped, let alone overheat. Right, and I was also mentioning before how someone could kidnap the kids, or someone could do something like that, and a kid could boil and cook in there. So I absolutely, Mary Toodles was always watching me like a hawk everywhere. So she certainly wouldn't even go. That thought wouldn't have gone in her mind. So yeah, there's something missing with this individual. Yeah. There's a lack of awareness of the surroundings. There's a being light on yourself and being heavy on the world, right? So what she did was she thought heavy of herself and lightly of the world. And when you do the opposite way, you're going to mess up everything around you. If you're living in your own bubble, especially when you have kids involved, it's going to pop. Right. Michael says, I'm a pair of scissors, just saying. Yeah, shout out to Michael with the scissors. And she didn't run into 7-Eleven for a soda. Right. Very good argument, Anna. Yes. Oh, okay, understood. Moki, understood. Not sure what color they have to be. Scared. But yes, understood what you need done, Moki. Yes. But a good argument, a good question about young and dumb, because it's not an experienced person. It's not a person that was a parent or somebody that was there for a long time, that was on their toes constantly, that just slipped up for a moment. It is a person that's inexperienced, that may have had misguidance, of course, and young and not really smart, young and dumb too. That is obviously there, but still, as I said, it's off the charts, and she did seem self-centered. And when you're dealing with kids here, you're dealing it's like dissecting a bomb, right? And you cut the wrong cord and you all blow up. So I definitely think it's just needs to take personal accountability and learn to pay the piper. It's sad for the kid that's still alive and for the kid that died, definitely. And good questions, chat. Anna said, Alien, my dad and your mom would be a match made in heaven. My dad was the king of overprotective. And Mary Toodles is a helicopter. Uh, and I'm glad she was, because I never was kidnapped or hurt. So when I got older, I was like, I'm glad that she was like that, because there's on YouTube, there's different stories about stuff happening to kids when they're like, people told stories about things that happened to them. I'm glad that wasn't me. And also, there's Chris Hansen that catches predators, and now Skeet Hansen, Skeeter Jean that catches predators. I mean, yeah, I could have been. And when I was a baby, some suggested I'd be in modeling or something, because I was everyone was always oh, look at the cute little kid, but somebody would probably want to snatch me, and they snatch any kid, but still I'm glad that they were very protective of me, because I wasn't either on an island for for an evil financer, or in some creepy dude's van somewhere. So I'm glad that I wasn't, in that situation. Glad she was a helicopter parent. And thank you, Anna. That was funny. And Passion says, I reckon parenting courses be mandatory and taxpayer funded for everyone who gets a positive result with a refresher course every subsequent kid. That sounds like a good idea, definitely, where people need to be mandatory for people to take parenting courses. That's a good thing to do, and that would be, and I think the taxpayer money could go to something productive like that. That's nice. One time my aunt suggested about me being in TV stuff, and Mary Toodles was not into that. And looking when I'm older and I'm seeing all these things coming out, I'm glad I wasn't involved in that stuff, but I'm glad to be on YouTube. So, yeah, definitely kids need to be watched and looked out for, because there are predators, and the sun heating up a car that can cause people to get boiled to death. There's Mother Nature, too, to be watching out for. So, yeah, they definitely need to be watching out for kids. They need to take courses about how to take care of kids properly. I definitely think that neglect needs to be punished. It can't be normalized. Very good points, chat. Very good conversation. All right. So now this 5-minute situation with this defense attorney right here. Let's go.
The mic good? Okay. Can everyone hear? This is an incredibly sad case about a 20-year-old mother of two, a car, and a terrible, awful mistake. But it's not about murder. The two children in this case are Mateo and Emilio. Ms. Hernandez is their mother, and she is a single parent living up in Visalia, where she works as a CNA in a care facility called Sierra Valley Rehab Center. Ms. Hernandez is the biological mother of Mateo and Emilio, and both boys were full-term natural births with no birth defects. Mateo breastfed for 7 to 8 months, and Emilio for approximately 4 months, because Ms. Hernandez was the primary provider in the family and she had to go back to work. On June 29th this year, Ms. Hernandez left from Visalia around noon, and she drove in her gray 2022 Toyota Corolla Hybrid, and she drove to Bakersfield to have a cosmetic procedure at 31 South Railroad. Ms. Hernandez arrives in Bakersfield at about 1:10 p.m. Prior to leaving Visalia, Ms. Hernandez and her children ate breakfast that day. The children ate fruit cups and bananas for breakfast, and later in the day for lunch, the children ate sandwiches and fruit. Throughout.
Oh, absolutely, Anna, because she's saying the lapel mics awesome, wish they all had it. Yeah, I wish they had them too, because if they all had those microphones, because a lot of times in the court we can't always hear them, but when they have better microphones like this, we could hear them. Yeah, she was a medical CNA. It's quite, you see, he opened up a door, which, I mean, I'm sure everybody could open up a door, but in this case, he opens up a door here by talking about what she did. So the prosecution or any of us can poke a hole and talk about that. Yeah. Passion said, very Roman aesthetic to the seal, and the backing board looks like a school blackboard for some reason. Blackboard for some reason. You are correct. It looks like a blackboard, and the seal is very Roman. Now, my school symbol was similar to that. It had to do with the Greeks. Greek warriors was their theme. But yes, my school had that same, that's their symbol of the warrior with the helmet on. And they also had blackboards, but they changed it now to more of a, like my time, part somewhere when I was growing up, they made it into the marker board. But yeah, I agree. The aesthetic of the courtroom, the court decorum is magnificent. I also like the woodwork too. I like how the wood has different colors to it, and it's like stacked up correctly. And I love the wall and the elegant Roman type seal. I agree with you, Passion, indeed. Oh, and right on, Anna. Yes.
Throughout the morning and the day, the children had access to milk, water, and juice. Around 1:30 p.m., Ms. Hernandez went into the business to check on the status of her appointment. She returned to the car and she did text Nurse Harmony Pacheco. Pacheco was the nurse providing the procedure.
I don't know, just the look on this. I don't know, the look on the judge's face. I mean, he's like, what is? He's not even believing what he's hearing. I don't know. He just seems like he's just like can't believe what he's listening to. Like he's like, where has this gone? He's like wondering how he got in this situation. Yeah, he's just, I don't know, just he may not have been thinking of that, but that's just that look. I like how the camera like zoomed into him specifically. There's very comedic moments in these trials like this.
Pacheco was the nurse providing the procedure. Ms. Hernandez went into the business around 2 p.m. for what she thought was a 15-minute medical procedure. Before she goes into the business, she left her kids in their car seats with cookies, a bottle of milk each, and with Mateo, she left her phone so that he could watch TV. Before she went into the business, Ms. Hernandez left her keys under the seat. The car was running. The air conditioning was on. Ms. Hernandez thought that the car would stay running, that the air conditioning would likewise remain on, and that Mateo and Amelia would be okay. And I want to pause for a second, because law enforcement would later determine two things. One, there's no black box information in this case.
Yeah, and it says the judge ain't buying it. Yeah, exactly. The judge is not buying it. Yeah. Lots of disapproval. All right, Passion says, working at a rehab might condition you to discard surface complaints. I have known people on withdrawal. You gotta turn off the part of your mind. It adds context for me. Oh, okay, Passion. Thank you for your take on this. Appreciate it.
And what I mean by that is that the car's data recorder cannot provide any on-off times for the engine relevant to this case. And number two, law enforcement verifies with Toyota mechanics that the car shuts off after an hour if the shift lever stays in park, and that timer system in that car is reset if the brake pedal is depressed or if the shift lever moves, neither of which unfortunately happened in this case. Things at the business were running behind, and Ms. Hernandez stayed in the waiting room too long. And when the procedure was done, she went back out to the car and discovered that something was very wrong with Mateo and Emilio. Mateo's cheeks were red, and that's something that happens with him according to what Ms. Hernandez will later tell law enforcement. And when Ms. Hernandez took Emilio out of his car seat, Emilio started shaking. In her own words, Ms. Hernandez starts freaking out, and she initially believes that Emilio's having...
Moki says, note to self, don't get a neck tattoo. All right, and Anna says, what about carbon dioxide in car running for 2.5 hours? It's carbon monoxide that I thought it was carbon dioxide too, but it was carbon monoxide from I learned, and basically, yeah, I don't know the technicalities of all that, but I would say if that is a factor, it certainly would be a big problem. And very good question to bring up because there's although the car is not inside a garage or an enclosed space where the fumes might do something, but still being in the vehicle like that with the engine running, it's possible there could be something like that too. That could be a factor, and if it is a factor, she certainly didn't neglected them, and they could be in danger about that too. That's a good point. Of course, the technical attributes of it, I'm not 100% informed on.
Having a seizure because Mateo had a seizure once before, and to her it looked the same. Ms. Hernandez calls 911 twice, and in between takes Emilio inside the business to the nurse. Ms. Hernandez attempts CPR on Emilio, and 911 helps her with that, but tragically, it doesn't work. And neither do the attempts by medical personnel. Later that day, Emilio is pronounced deceased at 17:48 hours, which Ms. Hernandez learns during her first interview with law enforcement. Mateo survives, thankfully, because his sweat.
Hello there, Roxy. Good evening to you. We are talking about a couple different cases, and right now we're talking about the Maya Hernandez case. All right, Passion says, I kind of wanted a barcode on the back of my neck like in Dark Angel since I was a teenager. That's an interesting one. That sounds interesting. And if we need to we'll just get at Walmart, we can get the barcode thing and just it'll go beep, and then we could buy, we could get Passion at the checkout. Enjoying the satisfaction knowing I'll wake up to a clean house. Nice. It's the Maya Hernandez trial. Vision of a young Jessica Alba and spandex are going through my mind right now. Nice. Scared.
Sweat glands have developed. Emilio succumbs to hyperthermia because his have not. Now, you've already heard that this case involves 4 counts. I want to say at the beginning of the case, here and now, that I intend to concede the counts related to involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment that are charged in counts 2, 3, and 4 when I speak to you again near the end of the case. That doesn't relieve the DA of the burden of proof of all the counts, but the defense is challenging the second-degree murder charge in count 1, and when I speak to you again at the end of the case, I am going to ask you to find her not guilty of that charge.
All right, and Roxy says, you guys, I took a break today from watching trials, especially the Brian Walsh trial. Yeah, okay. And yeah, Michael is referring to a character in Dark Angel as Jessica Alba. Okay, thank you. My heart just needs a little rest from all the evil that goes on in the world. Yeah. And this case, Roxy, is going to maybe reverse some things, but this case is like a lucky day. Because I'll tell you about this case. Scared. The Maya Hernandez case involves a California mother currently standing trial on murder charges after her 1-year-old son died from being left in a hot car while she was at a medical spa in June 2025. The trial began with opening statements on Monday, December 8, 25. Case incident, June 29, 25. A medical spa in Bakersfield, California. Victim, Emilio Gutierrez, 1 year old. Surviving child, his 2-year-old brother, who was also in the car, survived and was placed in protective custody. Charges, Maya Hernandez, 20, faces charges of first-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child cruelty. Potential sentencing if convicted of the murder charge. She faces life in prison. Hello, Mermaid. Good to see you. Welcome back. Yeah, the bald dude. The bald dude. I agree. You know, the son beating down on somebody, that is, and you know, in a car like that in a furnace, even if they survived, it certainly may cause brain damage for sure. I agree. He really is. Maybe he can play the opening statements on that one too. Okay. All right. So opening statements in the Shelly Nelly trial. Okay. Let's do that right now. Here we go. Come on, Timu. I'm scared. All right, I watched a year-old case last night, Bet. I'm sure you all heard of it. Shot her 2 sons and 5 in the head, and past ending statements were so powerful. Yeah, absolutely. And Mogi, why you need to take a break. I've had so much stuff going on. I've gotten one to it's helped. And I've been watching River trial was something else, and he ends up with 20-year-old judge. So impressed with that guy's education. Right. Okay. So here we go. We're going to go to the prosecution opening statement for Shelby Nelly. Here we go.
Ms. Raby, you may proceed with your opening statement.
because between December 14, 2018 and December 16, 2018, this defendant, Shelby Nealon, murdered Richard Ivancic, Laura Ivancic, and Nicholas Ivancic so that he could avoid the consequences of his actions for what amounted to 3 more weeks. Thank you all for your time and attention thus far. I know it's been a long day, a long process, but opening statement is my opportunity to tell you what I expect the evidence to show. A summary of the story that is going to come, if you will. And the testimony and the evidence in this case is going to transport you outside of this courtroom and into the lives of, and the last days of Richard Ivancic, Laura Ivancic, and Nick Ivancic. The day before, or 2 days before, he was brutally murdered was Richard Ivancic's 71st birthday. You'll get to hear a little bit about Richard. He was an athlete in high school, married his high school sweetheart, and with her had 4 children. Richard, same name, Renee, Mike, and Mark. They lived in Ohio, and after a number of years, Richard and his first wife separated. Get to the mid-1980s, Richard would eventually meet and marry Laura Ivancic. Laura was 59 in December of 2018 when this defendant brutally murdered her. Laura and Richard had a passion for fostering children. Children who didn't have any other place to go, who needed love and care, if only for a little while. Nicholas and Jamie were the 2 children that, after fostering, they were able to adopt, not providing just a temporary refuge and temporary love and care. Instead, Richard and Laura were there to provide them with permanent love and care. Nicholas had been born in 1993, which means he was 25 years old when this defendant killed him. And Jamie had been born in 1997. So in Ohio, where all these people were living for a period of time, Nick, as he got older, teenage years, worked for a time at Burger King. And he becomes friends at Burger King with another employee there, this defendant. Through this friendship, the defendant meets Nick's sister, Jamie. They become romantic, the defendant and Jamie, and they marry. Early on in their relationship, which would have been roughly 2015 and 2016, they moved to South Florida, where Richard had moved, and lived with him for a time. But then they end up moving back to Ohio, where Laura had remained and was living because her mother was dying and she was staying to care for her mother. This defendant and Jamie have a child up in Ohio named, a little girl named Bella, who would have been roughly 3 in December of 2018, when the most relevant time period. So the defendant and Jamie live with Laura or other members of Laura's family for a little while up in Ohio. And then the defendant and Jamie end up moving back down to Florida and living again with Richard in Spring Hill, here, close to here in Hernando County. Jamie and the defendant and their child live there for a time in Hernando. Laura's mother does pass, and she moves down to Florida to be with Richard. So roughly mid to late 2017, this defendant and Jamie rent a house at 10930 Norwood Avenue in Port Richey, which is in Pasco County. So now they and their child are living there alone, and Jamie has a second child, a little boy who will end up being approximately 1 year old in December of 2018. By mid to late February of 2018, the residence at 10930 Norwood Avenue is abandoned. Family is gone. Jamie's phone's having problems, but Laura and Richard and others still communicate with Jamie via texting or social media. Time passes. Laura and Richard, who had been close with Jamie, living with her, regular part of her life, they keep communicating with her, or trying to communicate with her, and trying to see their daughter. Jamie's family is in Ohio, and they're in Texas. Finally, Jamie and her family, which would be this defendant and the two kids, are going to come to Florida to visit. So by now, Richard and Laura have moved to 1954 Juanita Way, which would have been, they moved there sometime in mid-2018, which is in the Little Mobile Home Park in the northernmost part of Tarpon Springs, here in Pinellas County. It's a 55-plus community, but Nick stays with them for the most part too. He lives there as well. And he'd been living with Richard for some time in Florida during at the point where Richard had moved down here. So now Jamie and her family are coming to visit 1954 Juanita Way early to mid-December of 2018. They'll be there for Richard's birthday, the holidays, but at some point between December 2nd and December of 2018 and December 7th, so 2nd and 7th of 2018, Jamie's gray Hyundai vehicle arrives with this defendant, the two kids, but no Jamie. This defendant explains to them how Jamie couldn't make it because of work. She had to stay in Texas. They were also ducking collections investigators because they had abandoned the Norwood Avenue residence. So Jamie remained in Texas and didn't come. So the defendant and his two kids, remember about three and about one, are staying with Richard, Laura, and Nick for at least a week, which brings us to December 14th of 2018. So we know on December 14th that Laura goes on a shopping trip. We know it takes her up to State Road 50 in Hernando County. She goes to a CVS, she goes to a Cracker Barrel, she goes to a bank, and then the last place that we know she goes is to a Walgreens on US 19 in Port Richey, which would be on the way back. And that's at 3:45 p.m. in her red 2013 Kia vehicle. So backing up just a bit, the day before, which would be December 13th of 2018, was Richard Ivancic's birthday. Richard, as I mentioned earlier, turned 71. And on that day, he spoke to people on the phone. In particular, his son, Richard, I'm going to call him Rich to distinguish, his son Rich. And that is the last time that anyone outside of the people staying at 1954 Juanita Way will hear from Richard. Because once you hear the evidence and put the pieces together, it will show that Laura goes on that shopping trip. And either during those hours shopping, as the evidence will suggest, or potentially, maybe on the 15th at a shopping, if she's shopping again, definitely no later than the 15th, that Nick is apparently not home as well, possibly working. So Richard is alone, 1954 Juanita Way, with this defendant and the two small children. And this defendant, all along, had been planning to murder everyone in that house. So while Richard is walking in the house, in the dining room area, towards the kitchen, this defendant, armed with a hammer, attacks him. Richard gets hit twice in the chest. A third blow hits him in the neck. And then he is struck multiple times in the head. Richard lies there horribly injured for some period of time, as the defendant realizes he's not dead, and then comes back and attacks him more, inflicting injuries that will ultimately result in Richard's death. Richard gets hit in the head at least 7 times that can be detected. Because multiple blows are hard to tell. If you're hitting somebody in the same place over and over again, you can't necessarily distinguish it as multiple blows. But there's at least 7 blows to the head. In the nose, in the forehead, in the right eye, in the back of the head. So the defendant leaves Richard there on the floor and waits. He waits for Laura to return so that he can bash Laura's skull in as well. So Laura, as I told you before, we know was at Walgreens in Port Richey at 3:45 p.m. on December 14th, which was a Friday. Given travel time, she's alive until at least 4 p.m. on the 14th. Give or take a few minutes. So she walks into her house, no idea that Richard is lying with his head bashed in, dying on the floor. And as she goes to enter the kitchen, the defendant begins bashing her head in with a hammer, striking her at least 5 times in the back of the head. So that leaves Nick. While Nick is away, the defendant begins to hide the evidence of his horrible crimes. Both Laura and Richard are apparently incapacitated on or very near to carpets lying on the floor in the respective rooms that they are in. So the defendant uses the carpet to roll up Laura, drag her down the hallway of this mobile home to the end door, which is the master bedroom, and into the connected master bathroom. He then rolls up Richard in the carpet, drags him down the hall into the master bedroom, and closes the door. He then mops up the floor to ensure that Nick will not suspect the violent fate that his parents have suffered and the violent fate that this defendant has in store for Nick himself. Nick will eventually return home. It is not entirely clear when, sometime between the late afternoon, early evening of December 14th, possibly sometime on December 15th. But remember, Nick was a friend, a good friend of the defendant. They were close. They are close. So the defendant wants to hang out with Nick one last time before he bashes his head in with a hammer. They get pizza. They hang out. They watch TV. They smoke. Nick even leaves to get more marijuana at some point and comes back. At some point, they watch The Grinch. This goes on. At some point between the early morning of December 15th and the early morning of December 16th, Nick is asleep on the couch in the living room, and this defendant is awake. So now it's time to finish what he traveled from Texas to do. The defendant gets the same hammer, comes up to Nick while he's sleeping, and begins bashing him in the head. Nick springs up, and is not quick, like the defendant will later claim he wanted it to be, and there are multiple blows, bashing Nick's forehead in, causing the injuries that will ultimately lead to his death. At least 3, but in the estimate of this defendant, at least 5 to 7 blows. Nick is similarly dragged from the living room on some type of blanket from the couch into his bedroom and left unceremoniously on the floor just inside the door. About 2.5 weeks pass. Christmas comes and goes. Laura's brother-in-law passes away. Richard, Laura, and Nick aren't discovered dead and rotting at 1954 Juanita Way until New Year's Day of 2019. Multiple family members had tried to contact them between December 14th of 2018 and New Year's of 2019. But as they later found out, this defendant had been answering some texts on Laura's phone as part of his plan in order to throw everybody off, which we did successfully for a time. But on January 1st of 2019, Richard's oldest son, Rich, has been trying to reach his father and has not been able to. He compares notes with other family members, and he's concerned, so he calls law enforcement to do a welfare check so that the law enforcement here can have contact and make sure the people at 1954 Juanita Way are okay. The people were not okay. So Officer Rondos with Tarpon Springs Police Department responds along with other law enforcement officers. It doesn't take long to suspect that this is not the typical welfare check call they get, and that something far more sinister is going on. And it will take more than just a knock on the front door and making contact. So upon arrival, they get there. There's an obvious hole dug in the front yard. It looks like a grave. Dirt piled up on one side. Walking around the mobile home, there are flies visible on the windows, on the inside. And there's the smell. Law enforcement knocks on the door. No one answers. Front door is locked. But there's a sliding glass door that they're able to enter through a porch. And as they enter, it is more and more clear that this is going to be bad. There's a couch just inside the sliding glass door with blood all over it. And the place is just trashed. Garbage all over the floor in the kitchen. Moving into the living room from the kitchen, there's a drop cloth strangely laid out on the floor. And again, trash is lying around. So law enforcement, while announcing themselves, go deeper into the residence, into the hallway that all the bedrooms are off of. They check the first bedroom on the right. A little unkempt, but otherwise normal. Before even opening the next door on the right, they can see, which would be Nick's bedroom, they can see the fluid pooling at the bottom of the doorway. Open the door, and there's Nick.
This is the Shelby Nelly trial. It's the opening statement. And this guy, so he killed his wife and her parents and her brother and the family's 3 dogs in 2018, primarily to avoid getting caught for his wife's initial murder. A jury has recommended the death penalty for the law murders, and the formal sentencing is tomorrow, allegedly. That's what happened.
Covered with a tarp. Also, paint poured on parts of him. The room is just a disaster. Paint spattered on the walls, egg on the walls, garbage just piled on the bed in the middle, trashed. Down to the next bedroom, the last room on the hall, the master bedroom. Door opens, and there's Richard. Partially rolled up in a rug, covered in paint, as if someone had just poured some paint on him, onto his face. Beyond him, into the master bathroom, is Laura. Kind of rolled up in a carpet, a red towel on top of her back, some paint poured on her, and the rooms are just ransacked, trashed. Paint flung around on the walls, stuff piled on the bed, just like in Nick's room, drawers emptied, completely trashed. And all 3 occupants long dead. So now the investigation begins. A search warrant is obtained to search the residence. Initially, at first check, the identities of the bodies were not obvious, especially Nick. And with the investigation, especially one of this magnitude, a lot begins to happen at once. Medical examiner is going to have to come, collect the bodies, to do the autopsies, figure out what it was that killed these people. The scene is going to have to be searched and processed for evidence to try and figure out what happened to these people, who may have done this to these people. Anyone who could have or could lead to information, law enforcement is going to try and seek out and speak to. So on the scene, various areas of blood spatter are found and documented. Interestingly, several areas of blood spatter on the walls have been painted over with white spray paint. But multiple receipts and similar items are found from the December 14th of 2018 and later. Domino's pizza boxes, McDonald's receipts, notably a receipt from GameStop dated December 16th and a receipt from Home Depot dated December 18th. A white Krylon spray paint can is found in a box of trash on the porch. And in the washer of the laundry room is found a shirt with the Punisher logo on it and some shorts that appear to have either paint splatter or some sort of chemical like bleach or something splatter on them. Fingerprints are attempted from all kinds of different objects, all kinds of different places within this residence. Ultimately, a hammer is located underneath the master bedroom bed. That hammer will eventually be tested for DNA and it will match its last victim, Nick. This defendant's fingerprints end up being found all over the place. Jewelry box in the master bedroom, on that Krylon white spray paint can, on a package for masks. I say masks, I'm going to call them COVID masks. But remember, back in December 2018, nobody had heard of COVID. Nobody had even heard of a COVID mask. We all learned about that in 2020. But those things were still sold, still available, and there was a package for them with this defendant's fingerprint on it. There are also some things that should be there that were not. Most notably, Laura's red 2013 Kia vehicle is nowhere to be found. The only vehicle there is Richard's, a van belonging to Richard that was really Nick's, that Nick would use. Nick and Richard's IDs are not located. There's some personal items that are missing that are expected to be there. Richard was a coin collector. There's no, all the coin collection's gone. There's a revolver that should be there that's gone. Now, I told you multiple things are going on at the same time. One of the things that develops is that Jamie and this defendant are two people that law enforcement want to get in touch with, if for no other reason than for notification of what has happened and basic information. Eventually that shifts to wanting to locate the two of them and their kids because no one is sure exactly where they are or where they even should be. Later in the investigation, Jamie's gray Hyundai vehicle is located at the clubhouse parking lot of the mobile home park, which is roughly a couple hundred yards away from 1954 Juanita Way. The trunk is stuffed with multiple trash bags full of things that clearly came from 1954 Juanita Way. Paperwork that would have been in Richard and Laura's bedroom. Laura's and Jamie's passports. Some receipts indicating that the defendant had been in Texas until at least December 2nd of 2018. In the garbage bag, some receipts from Laura's probably last shopping trip on December 14th. There's a pillow saturated in blood. And also Laura's purse, which we know had gone on that December 14th shopping trip with her, and that also has blood on it. So major focus swiftly becomes finding this defendant, finding Laura's red 2013 Kia vehicle. With the help of law enforcement in Ohio, on January 3rd, 2019, Laura's 2013 red Kia vehicle is discovered at 1573 Newman Avenue in Lakewood, Ohio. And one of the people staying at that address at that time was this defendant. So Detective Anderson and Detective Scarpati with Tarpon Springs Police Department travel to Ohio. The 2013 red Kia is eventually searched, and more receipts are found. Walmart, McDonald's, and more, spanning dates since December 16th of 2018. 1573 Newman Avenue is searched, and a wallet with Richard and Nick's driver's license is located. Also, their credit cards, Richard's coin collection is found, some other items of interest, and also notably a weight belt. Through all the receipts that are collected from the various places that they were found, detectives are able to see that on December 16th of 2018, this defendant went to Walmart in Palm Harbor wearing the shirt with that Punisher logo that was found in the washer. And he buys a bunch of scented things, scented things which were also found in the house. He goes to McDonald's that day, gets chicken nuggets at lunchtime. He goes and sells a bunch of Nick's video games wearing the same Punisher shirt at GameStop in Palm Harbor in the evening hours. And then he eats at dinner time at McDonald's, again, getting chicken McNuggets. On December 17th of 2018, in the evening, he's at McDonald's again getting chicken McNuggets. December 18th of 2018, the defendant spends the late morning hours going to Walmart in Port Richey, where he purchases that Krylon white spray paint, as well as the COVID masks. Also, some additional items to include clothes that he will later be seen in. He goes to McDonald's that day around lunchtime and gets, surprise, chicken nuggets. And then he goes to Home Depot in Port Richey. At Home Depot, he buys tarps, which are found in the residence. One of them laid out. One of them appears to be on Nick. He buys a paint can opener, which is found in the residence. And also on the Home Depot surveillance, you can observe that he is wearing blue shoes, and I'm going to call them unblemished blue shoes. On December 20th of 2018, he goes to Dunkin' Donuts and Holiday. On December 21st, 2018, around lunchtime, he gets chicken nuggets from McDonald's in Port Richey. He then goes to Walmart in Hudson, where notably those blue shoes that were unblemished a couple days earlier now can be seen with paint or bleach splotches on them, consistent with the paint and the chemicals that were poured on the bodies. The defendant orders Domino's Pizza that evening at 1954 Juanita Way, so that would be the 21st, where he is still staying. On December 22nd, he goes to the McDonald's in Port Richey in the evening. And then on December 23rd of 2018, he leaves 1954 Juanita Way for good. And he leaves, and we track him out of town. He stops at a McDonald's on State Route 54 in Pasco County in Newport Richey at about 2:30 p.m. And then we next pick him up in Macon, Georgia at a McDonald's in the evening hours on his way to Ohio. And every time we were able to see the defendant and see the vehicle that he is using at any of those locations, it is the defendant driving that 2013 red Kia vehicle. Laura's 2013 red Kia vehicle. And then sometime Christmas Eve or Christmas, the defendant is in Ohio until he is caught on January 3rd. Defendant detectives get different records, different communications the defendant makes, and they reveal some of his activities, what he was planning to do as all this is playing out. Now, as I told you, Ohio authorities picked up the defendant, and Detective Anderson and Detective Scarpati flew up to Ohio as quickly as they could. Detective Anderson ends up sitting down with this defendant, and the defendant confesses. Chillingly, heartlessly, methodically, he describes his version of what he did and to some degree why he did it. One thing he says, though, that no one knew yet, although some had been starting to suspect and likely would have been discovered soon after, is about Jamie. Remember the defendant's wife, Jamie Ivancic, who he lived with at 10930 Norwood Avenue in Port Richey, way back in January, February of 2018. Well, it turns out that Jamie never moved away from Norwood Avenue. The defendant had killed her. According to the defendant, during an argument that turned violent, Jamie had armed herself with a knife. The defendant had disarmed her and then strangled her. And while she was helpless, he bashed her head in with a hammer. At least 12 separate blows, caving in both sides of her head. The defendant had then left her body in the bathtub for a few days while he figured out what to do. In that residence, he had a fenced-in backyard, so some privacy. He dug a hole about 3 feet deep, put Jamie in trash bags, and buried her in that backyard. He then trashed that residence to distract from his crime, pouring paint or other liquids all around the bathroom where her body had been bleeding out, messed the place up, and he and his kids abandoned it, fleeing first to Ohio and then later to Texas. And since then, the property manager had renovated the residence, rented it out again, and no one had yet thought to excavate the backyard looking for Jamie, who was, as of yet, no one had realized was missing. Because the defendant had then pretended to be Jamie on her phone, texting people, responding to texts, hiding the fact that Jamie was dead and buried in a backyard in Port Richey. It was a plan that was to some degree successful. That continued to be successful until January of 2019. But Jamie's parents had wanted to see her. They wanted to talk to her. They kept trying to communicate with her. And the defendant was afraid that his crime would be discovered. So he decided that he was going to travel from Texas to Tarpon Springs and kill them. He planned to kill them, to take their stuff, and to do the same thing with them that he had apparently succeeded with Jamie. So when he arrives at 1954 Juanita Way, without Jamie, it had nothing to do with Jamie having been at work or creditors trying to reach them. It was because she had been dead and buried for 10 months. He arrived to execute his plan that would help him avoid arrest and avoid the consequences of his actions. And execute it, he did. I expect the evidence to show that days before starting his Tarpon Springs murder spree, he was planning on taking Laura's car and going back to Ohio. He waited until he could safely crush their skulls with a hammer, one at a time, when he's alone with Richard. I say alone because the two children were very small, but while he was alone with Richard on December 14th, latest December 15th, he bashes his head in. He describes how he had to go back over and finish the job because initially he thought Richard was dead, but turned out he wasn't. Defendant patiently waits for Laura to return and then bashes her head in with a hammer. He then moves their bodies to the master bedroom, bathroom cleaned so that Nick won't realize that his parents are both dead in that trailer when he arrives. And of course, the defendant likes Nick. Nick's his friend. Doesn't like him enough not to violently murder him, but likes him enough to hang out with him for probably maybe the entirety of December 15th. And then when Nick is asleep, he swings the hammer at him. Again, Nick was jolted awake, and in the defendant's words, I think the defendant's words are jolted awake, but the defendant is unrelenting, continues to bash Nick's head in for another 6 or 7 times by his own count, until Nick is sufficiently incapacitated, and then he drags Nick's body into the bedroom. So then there's phase 2 of the plan. Remember, bashing Jamie's head in with a hammer and burying her in the yard, trashing the place, worked so well the last time. So the defendant begins the process of burying the bodies in the yard at 1954 Juanita Way and of messing up the crime scene. In so doing, he moves the couches around. He moves the couch that Nick was killed on into a different room to block off the entryway. He goes out to buy that Krylon spray paint. He uses that to spray paint on the walls to try and hide the blood spatter. He gets the tarps from Home Depot, and he gets rope at Home Depot so that he can wrap the bodies up and drag them out to bury them in the yard. He pours paint and chemicals on the bodies to try to help with the smell. He starts digging the hole. But sometime around the afternoon of December 18th or on December 19th, he has to change the plan. He realizes that Richard is too heavy for him to get to the hole, and that he may not have the ability to get the 3 bodies from the house into the yard during the cover of night and into the hole that he has been digging. He still messes up the house, but now his plan changes to he's going to leave the bodies where they are. He's going to go back to Ohio. He's going to work out, exercise, bulk up. Remember that weight belt I told you about? And in the meantime, perhaps the bodies will get lighter as they decompose. And then the defendant will return sometime around February, complete the plan, and bury the bodies. He uses Laura's phone to send messages to her family members, just like he did with Jamie. So on December 23rd of 2018, when he leaves 1954 Juanita Way, leaves the decomposing bodies of Richard, Laura, and Nick en route to Ohio. He does so to enjoy the remainder of the 3 weeks that he had bought himself for the price of violently ending 3 lives. Now, that's not all the evidence that I expect you'll hear over the next few weeks. Over the course of the next few days, Mr. Doga and I will be presenting evidence to give the general circumstances of the crime, but also to prove 4 different aggravators with respect to each of the 3 murders. 1, that the defendant has been convicted of another capital felony or violent felony. And since the defendant sits before you, having already pled guilty, he has been convicted of manslaughter for killing Jamie, which satisfies that aggravator, and also for each other murder he's been convicted of. 2, that the defendant committed the offense to avoid arrest. That in murdering Richard, the defendant was trying to avoid the arrest for killing Jamie. That in murdering Laura, the defendant was trying to avoid arrest for killing Jamie and Richard. And that in killing Nick, he was trying to avoid arrest for killing Jamie, Laura, and Richard. 3, that the way the defendant committed each murder was cold, calculated, and premeditated, based on the plan he made and the manner in which he set out to destroy the remaining members of this family. And 4, that the murder of Richard and Nicholas was especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel. And then, at the conclusion of the evidence, we will ask you to weigh those aggravating factors against any mitigation that may be presented, and then find that the aggravating factors outweigh the mitigation and that this defendant should be put to death by the state of Florida. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to see the defense opening.
I plead guilty to the first-degree murder of Richard Ivancic. I plead guilty to the first-degree murder.
That's something else. That says the sentencing. No, that is the same thing. This is the defense opening statements. This is the defense opening statement right here. So ignore what I just said a moment ago. This is the right one.
Of Laura Ivancic. I plead guilty to the first-degree murder of Nicholas Ivancic. That is what Shelby Neely said when he accepted responsibility for those 3 murders. And on that same day, he pled guilty to the lesser offense of manslaughter and was sentenced to 30 years for this homicide of Jamie Ivancic. We have taken a journey in this courtroom over the last week and a half. We've heard the unthinkable. We felt the sorrow, the gut-wrenching grief, and the overwhelming sadness. And yet, the law says you are never, ever required to impose a sentence of death in the worst imaginable case possible, ever. The judge instructs you, and the law says we listen to all the things that we've listened to coming from these victims' family members. And again, it's heartfelt, so incredibly sad, and so painful. And
Yeah, this is probably the opening of the sentencing part of it, something like that. So, let's see, this other thing I think I want to look at. You're welcome, Pash. You're welcome, Pussycat. Let's see, is this it? A spider who swallowed a fly. Yeah. I think that's the right one. I suppose. Let's see. Okay. Well, we're going to play this. Here we go.
what do we tell you to do with that? What does the law tell you to do with that? It tells you, hey, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, put that stuff over here because you can't consider it. because it's not an aggravator. So while we honor and we respect it, and we respect and honor them, you have to put those things over here. You've heard horrific facts. You've seen gruesome photos that no one should have to see. And again, you're still never compelled nor required to impose a sentence of death. Another journey you are going to take this week is one that describes how this little boy right here got from here to here. Your job is not easy. You probably never imagined that you would go from being at a coffee shop or speaking to friends about politics or your general beliefs on the death penalty to the reality of having to come into this courtroom and actually consider it. Some people say that the crimes and the facts are enough, but you are not those people. Those people were excused. You all took an oath and you made a promise and said that you wanted to know more. You needed to know more about Shelby, more information before you could make a decision individually, because it is an individual moral decision about whether he lives or dies. And let's be clear, the only way Mr. Neely is going to come out of the custody and control of the Department of Corrections is in a pine box, either way. Mitigating circumstances are reasons for life. They are not excuses. They are not defenses. Because of course, we all know he pled guilty. They are reasons why the death penalty would not be appropriate in this circumstance. Unlike the aggravators, which must be found by all of you collectively as a group, unanimously, beyond a reasonable doubt, mitigators do not work like that. Each and every one of you decide individually what mitigation is important to you. The mitigation that may be important to Mr. Call may be different than Mr. Sandiford, may be different.
Excuse me.
Maybe approach.
Yes.
So let's take a summarized journey of how Shelby got from this kid right here to over here. You will hear from various experts about how his life and his brain impacted him psychologically. His mom, Lisa Svensson, was married to a man named Bobby Neely. Before, during, and after her pregnancy with Shelby, Bobby Neely physically abused Lisa Svensson. Now, When Shelby was just shy of a year old, Lisa's mother, they were living in Texas at the time. Lisa's mother came down and got Lisa and got Shelby and moved them back up to Ohio. Sometime after that, Lisa met and then married Paul Svensson. And by all accounts, things were going well. She's a good mom, he's a good stepdad. And Shelby really never heard from his biological dad, Bobby, till he was about 15 years old. During this period of time growing up, Shelby was diagnosed with ADHD and placed on medication. You also hear about his depression diagnosis and what that means and how that affected him. But significantly, and I'll just say super important in this case, is the following. When Shelby was 15 years old, he heard from his dad, so his biological dad, Bobby. So he wanted to go down to Texas and see his biological dad. His mom had some concerns about that because she didn't want Shelby to be abused by his dad. She felt a little bit more comfortable because Bobby had remarried and so there was a woman in the house. So Shelby came down to Texas, and he was literally there for maybe a day before Bobby Neely's wife decided she was going to have sex with him at the age of 15. That's how old he was. And it didn't just happen once, it happened more than once. After Shelby visits, he comes back to Ohio, and he's even texting the stepmom, and she's not answering. He doesn't really understand why. He's texting his dad, trying to have some kind of communication with his dad. Dad's not answering. And one day, after Shelby's 17th birthday, Shelby's biological dad, Bobby, shoots himself and commits suicide. After that, everything changed. Everything. His mom and his stepdad will tell you about that. They'll tell you about the changes they saw in him. He actually went to counseling for depression, but he was a 17-year-old kid. So he went 2 times, and then he didn't want to go anymore, like a typical teenager. You will hear from a woman by the name of Rachel Rigby. She and Shelby became friends at a place called Hidden Valley Campground. Their families would go there for the summers, and they knew each other for 2 summers. And at one point they started kind of dating, I guess, at the campground. They never had any sexual relations. They lived actually about 40 minutes away from each other, 45 minutes away from each other. So never saw each other except for those 2 summers at the campground. But they would take walks together. They would talk with each other. They would help each other when one of them had something going on they wanted to talk about. And Shelby wrote a poem about his father, and he gave it to Rachel. Rachel kept that poem. She actually took a picture of it. And you're going to hear that poem. It's a poem about Shelby's father. Dr. Campbell, who is a clinical psychologist who is an expert in trauma, will come in and explain to you about the PTSD that Shelby suffers from the suicide of his father and blaming himself, to the homelessness that you heard about on the interview that his mother didn't know about because Shelby told her that he was staying with friends when he really wasn't, and he was homeless. And also the trauma from a domestic violence from Jamie. And don't get me wrong, Shelby, you've already seen it, has a toxic relationship with females. But it's important, and we'll get to that in a minute, why the domestic violence with Jamie is important. And you will also hear about that from Dr. Campbell. The perfect storm is brewing because what makes a seemingly normal person do something like this? Shelby had several head traumas. They are documented in the medical records. You will hear about them from a neuropsychologist by the name of Dr. Woe. It is important for you to understand, and it will become important for you to understand, how brain damage impacts a person's reaction to trauma. The abuse by his stepmother, the suicide of his dad, toxic relationships with women, shaped the rest of his life and affected his choices. As I said, you will hear from the neuropsychologist, Dr. Woe, and he will tell you about neuropsychological testing, objective testing, that he performed on Mr. Neely. And he will tell you about those findings. And you will hear that those findings that he had are corroborated by the medical records from Mr. Neely's past that we got from different hospitals. You will hear about an incident where he was hit by Jamie with a broomstick, and he had an intracranial bleed. Neurosurgery was recommended. Neurosurgery was recommended. He didn't get it, but it was recommended. Another incident where she hit him over the head with a frying pan. And another incident, not involving her, that was in 2012, where he was choked and fell and hit his head against the wall. You will also hear from Dr. Woe about Shelby's IQ score. And there's something called a verbal IQ score and a nonverbal IQ score. And the split, the difference between those two, you will hear is very remarkable, and he will explain to you why. The law requires that the aggravators that the state is to prove are to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt unanimously. So all of you together must agree. And I'm going to take one of those examples, the prior violent felony example, that he either committed a capital crime or a crime of violence. And the reason that we tell you about Jamie's violence on him is not because that justifies him killing her. It's because it's going to be important to the weight that you give that particular aggravator. If you get past that step, that's where your collective decision ends. And then you individually decide if the aggravators are sufficient enough, the ones that you found. Then you go on to decide whether the aggravating factors outweigh the mitigating circumstances. And this is that weighing that we talked about before. And you will not be limited at all in what mitigators you find. Even if we didn't mention something and you thought, oh, this could be a mitigator, you can find that as a mitigator. Anything in your heart that you consider to be mitigation. Remember, you said you wanted to know more. You needed to know more. Only if the aggravators are sufficient and outweigh the mitigators, only then can you consider the death penalty as an option. And these are all individual moral decisions. Again, regardless of anything, you never have to impose a sentence of death, and you may always, always consider mercy. Since you all walked in here last Monday, the judge, the bailiffs, the lawyers, you've been told where to sit, when you can go to lunch, when you need to be back, whether you need to stand up or sit down. But it's you all individually who actually have the power in this courtroom. It's individual power that you all have in making this decision. You will have many more answers when we're done here. And I did forget one thing. Some of you wanted to know, will he serve a purpose if he's in prison? And you will hear from a prison expert who will tell you in 6.5 years, Shelby has had no disciplinary reports, and you will hear from this expert about the things that he can accomplish in prison and the help that he can give in prison. 3 other things you will know by the end of this case, and some you already know, is did he accept responsibility? Yes, he did. Will he be punished? Yes, he will. And will society be safe? Yes, they will. We have met under the most tragic of circumstances. Let us not leave under the most tragic of circumstances. Sentence Shelby Neely to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Thank you.
Okay, and this other one. Okay, so that was the Shelly Nelly openings of the prosecution and the defense, and I want now at this point in time the show is over with. We now tomorrow there's going to be some sort of hearing about this tomorrow with Shelby Nelly allegedly, so we will see about how that goes, and that was the review for tonight. And Passion says, I would like to contribute to society somehow rather than sit useless in a wallowed box. All convicts seem like a waste of human work potential. I see your comment now, Passion. I wasn't looking at the chat for a second. Oh, that's a very good idea, Passion. A very good idea. See, and because they and many prisons around the world are different than ours, and they certainly can have a reform to it to be different. And very good points indeed, especially the ones in America. I don't know how they are over. I guess they're similar to where you are. I don't really know much about them, But yeah, because I've studied about different prisons in different places, and it looks like, and when people get out, they usually reoffend, or they get worse than they were when they got in, or say somebody had like a lesser sentence of something and they come out worse. So it certainly is an area that can be improved, in my opinion. So, good points. And all right, that was Shelby Nelly, not Shelly, but Shelby. We'll see tomorrow if he gets the death penalty or not. We reviewed the trials that we're looking at that's going on at the currently, and chat did excellent tonight. I commend you all. Very, very good job, everybody. Thank you, Passion, for your take on the different topics too. And at this point, we have reached a stopping point. So I want to thank you all for coming and hanging out with me in the chat, and peace.